Good evening, everybody. This is our September L&D Philly webinar. My name is Josh Mayleaf. I'm the president and one of the co-founders of L&D Philly. Excited to have everybody here tonight. This is a return visit for JD Dillon, our speaker for tonight, and I'm going to keep my intros and everything short so we can get right to the main event. Really excited about this. Give you a little bit of genesis here of where this all came from. But first, we were just talking about, as JD said before we started recording, if you're interested in what he's got to say, you can probably find him out there. He's very active in posting things on LinkedIn, which are interesting. Some on the topic we're on now. I believe the last time you were here was in speaking around your book, which was, I want to make sure I get the title right, The Modern Learning Ecosystem, which ties into what we're going to be talking about tonight. His day job is that he is the Chief Learning Officer for Axonify, and he's also the founder of, as you see on the screen there with the icon, of LearnGeek. And so where this all came from tonight, and why we're all sitting here, is I was down at the ATD conference in May in New Orleans, and for some reason, ATD deemed to put what I would say all of what I guess the best sessions that I thought all the ones I wanted to see were in the same time slot. There were literally like 5 sessions at the same time JD was speaking, and came down to I was on the other side of the convention center and wasn't sure I'd get a seat. So I couldn't make it, and I asked JD if he would graciously do an encore performance because this was one I really wanted to see, and I haven't figured out how to be in 2 places at once yet. So, heard good things about it, got a chance to talk to him down there. And also part of our story here in having JD return to Philly, if you read his full bio on the website, you can see, or on our website or on his profile, you can see that he's worked a couple of interesting places, including Disney, which is maybe the more interesting. And there we go in that one. You'll see all the places there. I'm going to hit on AMC because, fun fact that I think you shared last time, but I learned when we were talking a couple of years ago that part of your AMC experience anyway was at the movie theater up the road from my house at the lovely AMC Neshaminy, which if this news hasn't made it down to you in Florida, they're actually going to be tearing down most of the Neshaminy Mall, but the AMC theater is going to survive. So your legacy and time in at the theater continues to grow. And actually, I just saw Beetlejuice there last weekend, so I continue to frequent the place. So whatever you did, your legacy continues. I know this is probably one of the weirder intros you've ever had, but with that, I will turn it over to JD to talk about, again, the AI aspects. And part of this too is this is more about, application and using it than the prompting side of it. Right. I think I have that right. Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
So, and we're going to see some cool uses. I got a sneak preview and testing. So, but again, enough of me. JD, thank you again for doing this, and take it away.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everybody. Yes, my first job was at the AMC Neshaminy. I grew up in Bensalem. My family's from Port Richmond. I'm wearing Flyers orange. Not going to be a good year. It's going to be an interesting year when it comes to the Flyers. We can have a conversation about the Eagles later because I'm not nearly as excited about the Eagles. But hi. Thanks for hanging out with me. I just want to kind of have a riff conversation about AI because who's not having a conversation about AI right now? But hopefully, we can make this as informal as you'd like. If there's any particular questions or curiosities as we go, or if we have some time at the end, happy to share any insights or perspective I have with regards to both the technology itself as well as how I believe it will fundamentally reshape the learning and development function and profession along the way. So and that's what I want to focus on, is a little bit less on the tech side and how to use certain tools. While you'll see some of that in my presentation because I used AI tools to create my AI presentation. I'm a little more focused on the kind of strategic implications for organizations our function and how we adapt kind of our mindset and perspective on what learning at work becomes as a result of this next phase of kind of technological transformation. So that's what I'm doing. Feel free to throw any questions or curiosities you have in the chat as we go. And I'm just going to kind of share some perspective, and happy to go where is most interest to everyone here. That said, you see my bio on screen. I took my resume and dropped it into an image generator and said, generate an image that represents my career. And that's what it is. So as you can tell, I worked for Disney for about 10 years, hence the big castle in the middle. Spent about 6 years at Kaplan Higher Education and contact center operations. Started out my career at AMC Theaters and operations and HR management. And now I'm on the tech side of learning and development for the past 8.5 years or so. My team at Axonify builds learning technology and operations technology for frontline employees. So most of my career is wrapped around enabling frontline workers to do their best work every day. So that's a bit about what I do. Let's dive in. Are you tired of AI conversations yet? This is generally my mentality most of the time, and I work in technology. So it's actually my job to pay attention to and try to keep up and understand the implications of how we can take advantage of new technologies to help people do their jobs more effectively. And I'm frustrated with the amount of noise and hype and buzz. I can only imagine people like yourselves who have real jobs and problems to solve and fires to put out on a daily basis. But this also AI generated image basically, I think, explains the current state of the AI conversation. This is my favorite AI headline from the past year. This is from The Verge, my favorite technology website. I love AI, but I can't find a use for it. It'll be great as soon as I can figure out what it's good for. And I think that's kind of where we are right now when it comes to this general conversation around artificial intelligence. A lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of tools, a lot of vendors. Here's some quick stats. If you've been to there'sanaIforthat.com, fun website, there's 15,000 different pieces of technology on that website. So if you want to find a tool that at least says it can do pretty much anything using AI, it's there. There's over 3 million custom GPTs and ChatGPT, including my own, which I'll talk about at the very end. If you just want to talk to me without ever having to talk to me, I have a way that you can do that. And then Josh was talking about the ATD International Conference a couple months back. Formally, 10% of the agenda was about AI. That's a low count, though, because I'm going to go on a limb and say this came up in the vast majority of conversations. We keep talking about it. I find right now, the way I would describe the current state of artificial intelligence, especially in the workplace, but broadly speaking, I refer to this as the iBeer phase of AI. That on screen you see is the original iPhone with some of the original apps that were available back then. Some of these are familiar, like calendar and photos and camera, things that are still on your mobile device today. On the bottom row, though, or next to the bottom row, you see things like, remember when we had lighters on the screen of our phones and we thought that was really exciting, that you could put a lighter and hold it up. And then there's an app there called iBeer. If you don't remember, it made it look like on the screen of your phone, it was a beer. And then when you tilted your phone, made it look like you were drinking your beer. That's what we used this technology for back in like 2007, 2008. I find we're there right now when it comes to technology searching for a purpose, a solution, looking for a problem in a lot of cases. But that said, let's compare the iBeer phase of the iPhone in like 2007, 2008 to where we got pretty quickly in the early 2010s and where we are now with how we basically live our lives through those particular screens. So it's that version of transformation I believe we're in the middle of right now. So right now, a lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. Very quickly, organizations and technology providers and professionals are going to start to find kind of their footing and find the right problems to solve with this technology. And the key for conversations like this is how do we start thinking about things the right way so we can prepare ourselves, prepare our teams, prepare our organizations for this kind of next transformation. And what I fear for learning and development is that we will get so distracted because we have a shiny object thing. Most people do, a lot of different professions do, but L&D, we like toys, we like technology, we like making stuff. And I fear that if we get so focused on the technology itself and conversations around like prompt engineering and how to build courses faster and those types of things, we're going to miss the fact that the world is shifting around us and that people within our organizations are making decisions and changing not just how work is done, but the role that we're expected to play within that. So my hope and what I'm trying to do is just kind of help everyone come to the table with a certain informed perspective so that we're having the right conversations, paying attention to the right things as we move forward. And most of all, there's this statement. Let me know if you've heard this one before or recently. This is kind of the popular term or the popular phrase that's meant to help people think about, well, where do I fit when it comes to technology and the fears people have around technology taking my job. So a lot of people are out there saying, well, AI will not take your job. Someone using AI will. I disagree. I fundamentally not only think that statement is wrong, I think that statement is also just misguided and is going to cause people to make some bad decisions when it comes to preparing for shifts in the workplace and specifically shifts in our profession. So hopefully in the next 30, 40 minutes or so, I can help you understand why I believe this is incorrect and maybe help you kind of adopt a similar perspective that I have. But like I said, thanks so much for hanging out. Let's go Flyers. Feel free to drop comments or questions in the chat. So what we're going to do while we're here today, hopefully get past the hype and the noise. We're going to explore the strategic potential and perspective of AI in learning and development, talk about some practical steps we can do to move our strategies and our practices forward, and just kind of be frank and open-minded and forward thinking and not be as afraid or trepidatious or kind of rejecting of ideas as some people are. I see a lot of conversations out there, especially on Reddit, where people are saying things like, well, AI can't take my job. It can't do my job as well as I can. And my reply is, well, that's not the right conversation to be having because that's not the bar for success in this conversation. So we're going to talk about, and I'll show some examples of cool technology. We're not really going to dig into that today, but if you have any particular questions, I have a resource website where I have all of my AI tools listed. So if you're wondering about any tool I use to do any of the things you see on screen, all of that is available if you're curious. So as mentioned, I believe right now we're in the next major paradigm shift when it comes to not just technology in the workplace, but how we live our lives through technology. Depending on how long y'all have been doing what you do, you probably remember the shift to personal computers coming out of off-prem into the cloud, social technology, and the mid to late 2000s, mobile technology, late 2000s, early 2010s. And now the question is, well, how is AI going to shift technology and how we live through technology? When I talk about AI, I like to specify the fact that I'm talking about kind of two different brands of technology. A lot of times when you say AI right now, people go straight towards generative AI, right? Image generators, text generators, course generators, those types of things. I'm thinking more holistically about all of the different ways this brand of technology is shifting how we do our jobs, how we live our lives. So that includes the non-generative side of AI, where we're not creating new information, but we're interpreting data in order to inform or complete tasks or make decisions. So that's the very common, use of mobile navigation apps like Google Maps or Waze, the recommendation algorithms that take place in your streaming applications, Grammarly, and a lot of what that technology does. So that brand of AI-enabled tech's been around for a bit at this point. And then more recently, we've seen the emergence of the generative side where we can create, quote unquote, new content based on source material. So whether that be creating text, audio, video, mixed media. And that obviously is a conversation that's changing every day. So when we talk about AI, just as a primer, we're talking about technology that's very good at doing a certain list of things. So AI is really good can recognize patterns, can automate repetitive tasks, summarize large amounts of information, make predictions based on a data set. So when we talk about predictive analytics and those types of capabilities, and then really identifying what might individuals need based on their personal profile, hence the kind of Netflix recommendation idea. So AI-enabled technology is really good at those things. It's really bad at a lot of other things. So we have to just keep in mind that we're not creating original ideas. Technology doesn't know what is real and what is not, what is true and what is not, unless you tell it. It doesn't understand context, apply common sense, or have judgment, ethics, empathy. The thing I always warn people against is please don't personify technology. Even if it looks like a person, it's not a person. There's a lot of conversations around like AI avatars, right? The fake people. You'll see an example of that in a minute. It's not a person, it's an it. So I refer to my clone as an it. Don't call it JD, not JD. So I think the best way to summarize kind of the transformation we're in with technology right now is we're going from a world where we tell the machine what to do, right? You click keys in order to tell a program to take certain actions for you, or you're working in Photoshop and you use different tools and you're telling it to circle this area, lasso that area, fill in this area with this color. We're going from that world towards a world where we're now going to tell the machine what you want. So instead of having to do all of the commands and all the steps yourself, you can focus on the outcome, and the machine is going to fill in the blanks for you. So again, depending on what exposure you have to AI related technology, a lot of people use ChatGPT, and a lot of people talk about, in almost every webinar about AI, at some point, someone uses ChatGPT to write a poem or a song. But that's an example, right? Instead of having to do the steps to write the song yourself, you just tell ChatGPT, I want a song about this in the style of this band, and it takes care of that for you. Silly example, but an example of kind of how our relationship to technology is rapidly shifting through the emergence of these types of capabilities. And then when you take that down to the specific focus of HR and learning and development, we're seeing an emergence of a wide variety of different types of potential use cases. I would say a lot of these use cases are in early stages. Not a lot of case studies or proof points or really detailed examples yet, because it's still early but moving fast. But this is a piece of information from Gartner, where they kind of mapped what the potential feasibility and business value was of everything from using AI to manage skill databases, to virtual assistants, to personalized learning, payroll optimization. So it's just a great example of how pretty much every function and every technology vendor is currently taking a hard look at what we do, how we solve problems, how we develop tools, and asking questions. Well, how can we leverage this new technology? Not just to do what we're doing today, but find ways to open new doors that maybe were not available to us in the past. So I'm not going to go deep into all of these different potential use cases, but if you have any questions about any of them as we go, happy to dive in. But what I think is interesting when you look at this list of kind of the most significant technology paradigm shifts of the past 25 years or so, they have something in common when it comes to the learning and development profession. It's that we've always lagged behind. We have not necessarily been driving this conversation either within our organizations or even our own practices. And I still know plenty of organizations that are still trying to figure out the implications for mobile technology in the workplace, right? How do we use phones to help people do their jobs better, even though phones have become ubiquitous in our lives over the last 10 years, and since the pandemic especially, much more commonly used within the workplace. So the question becomes, well, as L&D, of course, we don't get to make all of the decisions for our organizations. We're not the IT department. We don't have unlimited budgets. So we often have to wait when it comes to other people making a decision to implement new sets of hardware devices, or allowing us to say we can implement a new tool, because they're obviously compliance teams and they're averse to risk. And one of the most common things I hear in AI conversations from L&D people is, my IT department won't let me, or my company won't let me. And you might be having a similar experience. The challenge is, though, when those situations continue to emerge time after time, paradigm shift after paradigm shift, it pushes us further and further behind the evolution of the people that we're trying to support, and also just how we live our day-to-day lives. I always love to point out with accessing information. How much easier is it for you to solve a problem at home as compared to solving a problem at work? Because at home, you have a completely different set of tools and a much larger database of information to pull from with YouTube and Wikipedia and Google. But then you go to work and you have SharePoint, and you can't find anything in SharePoint, and every department's got a SharePoint, and you're just in this conundrum that doesn't make sense based on how technology should work day to day. So how do we try our best to not fall behind when it comes to this next shift in how we live and work through technology? So what I suggest is that when you look at kind of digital transformation in the workplace, there's three kind of levels that it takes place. There's the individual level, how it impacts me as a person, me as a professional doing my job. The function in which I work, so the HR function, the learning and development function, the marketing function, and then the organization as a whole, how work is done here and what work we're doing here. And I think too often we get very focused on the individual side of the story, and we don't necessarily understand how these three pieces fit together and how one informs the other, which informs the other. So that's what I want to spend the rest of our time really talking about, is how do we come to the right level of understanding of how this technology is changing these different layers of our organization. And then how do we try our best to not only prepare for it, but do our best to get ahead of it and inform the conversation so that AI isn't something that happens to us. It's something that we get to participate in as members of a team and an organization. So I will start at that individual level, because I think this is the thing that's most achievable or attainable to a lot of people right now, because we are in this kind of early state of flux when it comes to what companies are and aren't willing to do when it comes to AI, because a lot of organizations are still worried about data security and privacy and risk and those types of ideas. So the question becomes, and I'm curious if anyone has an example or perspective here, feel free in the chat, or if you want to come off mute. How has AI transformed how you do your jobs to this point? Has anything changed over the last year or two as AI has become a bigger part of the technology conversation that's changed how you do what you do? Oh, Michelle was getting ready to say something.
I was. I didn't realize I was not on mute.
Hi, Michelle.
I mean, it's for me, AI has changed my job dramatically. I mean, I manage an online help, and I have put it into a generative AI, which has really helped our staff learn how to, helped our staff find answers to stuff through our content.
Mhm.
Just this week, I've been using Synthesia and building e-learnings in a few hours versus taking a couple days. So it's really transformed what I've done.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I see in the chat as well, Anna says, yes, writing learning objectives, designing content. Jennifer, I'm working on a project to build an entire certificate course. Not currently applying it widely, but using for small specific tasks. And it's been interesting in the fact that I've been having these types of conversations for about a year at this point. And it's just interesting to see how, if I asked this question late last year, crickets. Earlier this year, a couple small examples. Now I'm starting to hear things like you said, where, oh, this is becoming a core part of how I reimagine how I do what I do every day. So it's just a great example of how fast things are moving, even at the individual level. And as an example for me, that's my AI tech stack. Most of those tools were not widely available, at least with AI capabilities, again, just 2 years ago, since the ChatGPT release kind of blew up the entire marketplace. But I now regularly use all of the different tools you see on screen. And what's interesting is it's not just enabling me to do what I have always done differently. This technology is helping me start to rethink where I spend my time and what types of things that I can do. So it's really kind of expanding my perspective. So a couple quick examples. This is actually a visual of the moment I used my company's digital assistant to find out that I can get an upgrade on an international flight more than 5 hours. So I just happened to capture that moment because I asked someone, I was like, do I get to upgrade my flight if I'm on a plane for an extended period of time? And it actually saved me considerable inconvenience in this regard. But digital assistants, I think, are going to be a huge part of our conversation and story, just as professionals moving forward. But a simple example of a tool I use every day. I no longer take notes in meetings. I have tools that do that for me. Has anyone ever been to a meeting where there are more AI note takers in the meeting than there are humans? I've had that moment. It's strange because everyone kind of brings or sends their digital friend. Then I start to wonder, why are we here at all? It's literally a meeting that should have been an email. Best example of that. But I just use Zoom's tools to automatically summarize meeting notes. It saves a lot of time, allows me to focus on the actual conversation rather than typing alongside. I produce a lot of video, as I mentioned earlier before we got started. So I'm using a different set of editing tools. So on screen, all of these shorts were edited using a tool called Opus Clip. And the captions in the two videos on the left were both automatically generated using AI as well. And then this is a more recent example. You mentioned Synthesia and the work that you do. This is my digital avatar named LearnGeek AI. I recently spoke at an ATD event in South Korea. I do not speak Korean, but I wanted to not only deliver my presentation in Korean, so I translated all of my slide materials using AI into Korean, but I also wanted to greet the audience, just kind of give an authentic thank you. I did not want to mess that up, however, because I'm just not great at speaking alternative languages. So I deployed my avatar to do it for me.
안녕하세요. 저는 JD의 디지털 어시스턴트 러닝긱 AI입니다. JD는 세션을 시작하기 위해 해달라고 부탁했습니다. JD와 달리 저는
I assume most of you did not understand what I was just saying, but it was interesting how well received that was, given the fact that I didn't deliver an entire presentation using my avatar translated into Korean. Something that I played on screen for about a minute and a half to start my presentation. But people were very appreciative of the fact that I made the effort, given that most of the people in the room did not speak English as a first language. And then my presentation itself was captioned in Korean while I spoke English. So finding all types of interesting ways to alter my own practices or do things in entirely different ways just over the last year and a half or so. So what's interesting is, based on your examples and my own, I find AI is helping us do our jobs in new ways. But the question I think is important to ask is, are we doing the right jobs? Because again, that image from the very beginning of the presentation with the guy in the hoodie surrounded by people that are changing the landscape around him, I fear if we get so focused on, well, how do we do what we do today more efficiently, generate more content, make content more accessible, more available to people, all of which are great things, but it's not where the story ends. There are some immediate gains to be had from this technology and improving our existing practices. But how do we, again, think about the bigger picture and adapt what we do and how we do it to meet that picture? So I think it's important for us to go from that individual conversation that I find a lot of the AI conversation in L&D to be focused on, how to use new tools to do existing jobs more effectively, and go to that higher level in the organization to understand, well, what is the organization going to do? What decisions are they making informed by this technology? And how is that going to fundamentally change what work is done and how that work is done within our businesses? And you might have seen a bunch of headlines over the course of the past year with regards to how organizations are thinking about taking advantage of technology in different ways to not just run their businesses the way they do today, but fundamentally rethink their businesses. There was the very viral conversation about the CEO who laid off 90% of their contact center staff, which I think the math, if I remember correctly, that was like 30 people. So they didn't lay off hundreds of people, but that's a significant chunk of people in favor of using an AI-enabled bot to do the work. I firmly believe that you'll be talking to a robot when you go to the drive-thru sooner rather than later, because just like my bot, robots can speak a wide variety of different languages, probably hear better in the noisy environment of the drive-thru, and they'll always try to upsell you a large soda. So fundamentally, we see a lot of organizations making decisions, or at least looking for decisions that they can make to take advantage of this technology. So right now, 60% of organizations have adopted generative AI to some degree. Spending is through the roof. So it's one of those situations where there's so much money being spent on this conversation, it's not going to go away. Whereas if you kind of remember when VR headsets were like really popular for like 15 seconds, and then people realized that they're a purposeful targeted tool and not a mass consumer technology, that's not happening when it comes to AI based on the amount and scope of investment. About a third of companies have generative AI in their board of director agendas. So it's reached the highest level of decision-making within companies. 37% of business leaders say that they've already replaced workers with AI. So organizations, I believe right now, especially because we're in budget season for organizations whose budgets kind of turn over in January, there are organizations right now that are making judgment calls between staffing and technology. And while it might not be a huge conversation that hits the headlines to say, organization replaces 90% of people with AI, there are at least small and subtle conversations being had to say, well, if I have to make an investment, do I hire a person or do I invest in that technology instead and potentially get more gains from it? And then finally, a significant number of business leaders are speaking to the importance of people being able to take advantage of this technology and use it as part of their jobs if they want to be part of the organizational story moving forward. And the image I put on the right side of the slide is meant to be a bit dour, because I think there's a reality to this conversation in terms of how corporations and executives and boards of directors and shareholders make decisions and prioritize things. which is why I think it's important for everyone, regardless of function, to be plugging into these conversations to figure out how are things changing around me and how do I best prepare. And it's not about making sure I don't get replaced. I believe it's making sure that we evolve as professionals, just as we've always had to when the world or organization changes around us. So it's a serious conversation, hopefully not a full downer type of a conversation, but I think it's important to take that perspective because fundamentally, a lot of businesses are betting on this technology to not just unlock new ways of doing business, but also fundamentally changing how work is done. Contact centers, I think, are a great example. I also love anytime you prompt AI to generate an image of a workplace where people use AI, it just turns into something ridiculous like this. It's like the Jetsons, but on steroids. There's just robots sitting on tables, which that's not how anything works. But contact centers, I think, are a great example when it comes to the adoption of this technology moving forward. You've all probably had the experience. I don't know, maybe you support a contact center today, or you've maybe called one. Very few people have ever called a contact center happy. It's not one of those kind of environments. But when you operate a contact center, obviously you're looking for opportunities to maximize efficiency, to do more with less narrative that has dominated the workplace for the past year and a half or so. And you're looking to scale consistency. So no matter which agent picks up the phone, you get the consistent answer, consistent experience, and they don't introduce risk by going off script or answering questions incorrectly, being non-compliant, those types of challenges. And obviously you're looking at reducing costs because literally every business on the planet operates from that perspective. So you see a lot of contact centers at this point as kind of early adopters of technology to say, well, if basic types of conversations, right? Like someone calling in and wanting to make an appointment, calling in to ask a basic question about billing. If a chat bot via text or a machine can have a very basic interaction, do I need my human contact center agents for that type of conversation? Or should I have less contact center agents, but they're focused on the escalations, right? The tier 2, tier 3 type of conversation where someone is just screaming agent into the phone relentlessly because they need to talk to a person, or they just have a complex situation that a machine can't properly understand or can't empathize with. So we need to think about putting people in different places. So it's not that all people are missing from the scenario. It's that maybe there's a smaller group of people doing more targeted work. But then when you think about, well, where does L&D fit into this type of situation? So if you think about your contact center agent, when you're a tier 1 agent, you again take those simple calls, right? I have an issue with my bill. Hey, can I schedule a service appointment? When you hire people into the contact center, people can learn how to take those basic calls pretty quickly, a couple weeks. But those second and third level calls, that takes a while. So typically people progress in their job. But what if you remove tier 1 entirely? Now when people get hired into your contact center, L&D now has to get them up to level 2 and level 3 just as fast, if not faster, than we used to have to get someone to level 1. So again, a basic example of how we need to start thinking differently about what's going to be asked of us if organizations start making decisions through this technology to change how the business works. And I see a lot of examples in contact centers right now as a case. So that takes us from the organizational level to, okay, the function. What's the best way to help the organization, to help the people that continue to work in the organization accomplish this new version of work? So at a functional level, as L&D, I think it's important for us to answer a set of questions. We have to know, one, how is work going to be done in this new version of the workplace? So when our senior stakeholders, the executive team, management make these decisions that changes who does what, well, what work has to be done? What do people need to know how to do in order to accomplish that kind of work? What help do they need to develop that knowledge and skill? And then we can figure out, well, where do we fit? Right? What does L&D do in this version of the workplace moving forward? And if we don't have the answer to those other questions, we might miss the mark when it comes to not only the role that we play, but how we adopt new technologies to improve how we're able to do these jobs. Hopefully this is making sense. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking myself into a circle when it comes to this conversation. But I have good news. I've been a kind of downer for the last 7 minutes or so. The good news is that learning doesn't change in any of this conversation, because learning how to do something is fundamentally a human experience. It's a human process. How we help people learn and help people improve their performance, that's where the change takes place. But I still believe that regardless of what you do, where you do it, what industry you're in, every person needs 6 fundamental things in order to do their jobs effectively, right? You need the latest update. You need core job training on your core required skills. You need access to support and help when you have a question. You need someone to tell you if you're doing a good job and provide you feedback. You need a chance to practice and refine your skills. And you need a chance to learn and do more and take that next step. So for me, this framework that I included in the book that I wrote a couple of years ago with ATD at this point, I believe these ideas still hold true, that learning and development at work continues to look something like this, where you need to make sure people have access to the right information at the right time. They can raise their hand and get help when they need support. They constantly reinforce the things that they learn along the way. Someone provides that feedback. And then when they need to, there's the more structured training side of the conversation. So I'll pause for just a second. Sorry, I have to step away for 1 second. I'll be right back. For the moment, read on the scenario on screen and think about, well, how would learning and development solve this type of problem? I'll be back in 1 second. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm back. So we take a look at the scenario. We have an operation, let's say it's a grocery store, making a major SOP change. You've probably had this experience. It's rolling out in 6 weeks. We need to retrain the entire frontline workforce on how to execute the new process. So typically, what would happen in this type of a situation with a traditional L&D team? Well, on one side, we always have the subject matter experts, our management we're working for, the legal compliance team. On the other side, we've got the audience we're trying to support. We sit in the middle, right? And we take advantage of our tools, our processes, and our technology to connect the dots between the people who know and the people who need. So this is kind of your traditional learning and development model. So in the case of this new SOP, traditional learning and development solutions may look something like, well, we make sure the SOP is available, maybe in a couple of different languages based on people's preferences. We make some job aids so people know how to apply the new SOP. We provide some update information so they know about the new changes that are taking place. We provide a place they can go and ask questions. Maybe they call a contact hotline if they have questions about how to execute the new process. We might reinforce some of that information. So maybe we send questions out to managers and they ask in team huddles to reinforce, make sure people remember the new process. We make sure managers know who's doing it and who's not implementing the new process, if we have maybe some data and a dashboard. And then, of course, we have to do the training course. So we have the SOP update course that's available in a couple of different languages that we require all of the team members to complete. So that's just a quick example of a traditional learning and development solution using the framework that I talk a lot about to make sure people get the update and they change their performance accordingly based on a new process. But then the question becomes, well, in a world of AI-enabled tools, and a lot of the tools that you're using today that you mentioned when I asked earlier, how AI is changing how you do your jobs, well, how can we potentially solve the same problem faster, cheaper, in a more equitable way and more scalable way? Well, if you look at the framework I talked about, like I said, I don't think learning changes as AI influences how we do our jobs every day. But the types of solutions do fundamentally change. So we look at the same scenario again with a list of potential solutions. Instead of maybe having to create all of these materials ourselves, like you said, you're automatically generating some content. So in this case, we might take that standard operating procedure, upload it into a course generator or a content generator, and automatically create a summary document, a digital set of update messages that get deployed out to our employees. Maybe instead of a contact hotline, there's a digital assistant that the employee can now just ask on a mobile device questions about the new process. Maybe there's also reinforcement nudges. So they get asked a question every couple of days automatically to make sure they remember the information. And then their managers get automated nudges as well to make sure that they're following up with the right employees. So the solution looks similar in an AI-enabled world, but what I would posit is important to understand is that I believe we're heading towards a world where L&D doesn't necessarily have to be involved in that process. And I think that's the key for us to think about, where does L&D fit moving forward? Because traditional L&D, again, we sit in the middle of the story. There's plenty of times when people go around us, right? You've had that moment where instead of them asking for your expertise, they go out and they buy training, or they just build a PowerPoint and throw it over the fence to people on the other side. And then you have to get involved because it's not approved, that type of stuff. In this world, I believe the ecosystem itself, the availability of these types of tools to everyone in our workplace, changes the role that learning and development plays. Because the same tools that you're using to automatically generate content, to automatically generate a course, to generate reinforcement questions, to generate video content, all of our subject matter experts have access to the same tools. And those tools are going to get better and better and more informed by our types of expertise. So I believe our role moving forward is less about having to be the people in the middle, having to be the builders, and more about, well, how do we make sure that the ecosystem is informed, is using the right practices, is using the right data, so that we can connect the people who need and the people who know more directly and get out of the way. So rather than being pushed aside, or, your subject matter experts just going and buying course development tools and using them themselves, I believe it's our job to inform that transformation and help people figure out, well, when's the right time to pull in subject matter expertise like learning and development? And when does it make more sense for the subject matter expert, the compliance team, the management team to use these tools themselves to be able to provide people with the right support at the right time? So for me, I believe we're in the beginning of a transformation from legacy practice to AI-enabled practices as L&D. The items on the left side of the screen, I don't think they go away. It's just they're no longer the centerpiece of our capability and our function. We're still going to build courses. We're still going to deliver programs, less often and less as the default solution. And I believe our role as L&D is becoming more and more about curating input for the ecosystem, making sure the digital assistant that people use on the job to solve problems and ask questions, that it's feeding from the right information, and that people who are inputting that information are doing it in a way that best works with the technology. So I believe we have a critical role to play in the transformation of work and learning at work through this story. But I believe it goes beyond using technology to do what we do today differently. And it's more about fundamentally rethinking the position that we play within an AI-enabled ecosystem. So as I start to wrap up and see if there's, one, if this made any sense at all, and two, if there are any questions I can answer. One, I believe it begins with us understanding, well, first of all, how is work changing? So in your organization today, are you plugged into those conversations at the highest level you can get to say, well, as we head into budget season and as we head into resourcing conversations, how are executives within this company thinking about this technology? What are we trying out? What are we experimenting with? Where are we investing? And how is it changing the way they think about the way the business is run, what type of work is done, and who is doing that type of work? If we don't understand that part of the picture, we can't make the right decisions about how we evolve our own function. From there, we can determine, well, where do we have to evolve? What tools and systems and processes do we need to have in place to support that version of work? Like I said, if our contact center is going to remove a layer of employees, but now we're going to lean harder on a more advanced set of skills, well, how do we help people develop those level 2, level 3 skills more effectively? Because we're less concerned about people doing that level 1 work, because a lot of that's being automated. And then from there, it's about, well, how do we adopt the right mindset and build the right skills where we can enable this version of learning and development? And for me, the biggest one is that so much of what we do and where we struggle as organizations comes down to mindset. It's not as much about the technology, because frankly, everyone will have access to a similar set of tools, kind of like most learning management systems are really, really similar when you get down to it. it's going to be similar in terms of, well, everyone's digital assistants have certain capabilities or plug into certain types of tools in the same way. It's more about how are we thinking about our evolution? Are we open to trying new things and repositioning how we provide value in the workplace? Or are we going to struggle with that evolution? Just like in the past, some people who are classroom trainers really struggled with the introduction of technology and building more digital content and doing a little bit less physical instruction, and they couldn't find their place. But some people were open to advancing their skills, learning how to do different things, and maybe taking on entirely different roles because they found a new way to provide value based on what they were interested in and what they could really do. And I believe that's where we are and the decision we have to make as L&D moving forward. So how fast is this going? Where are we going in the future? I have a couple guesses. I'm going to be very wrong when it comes to some of this information because I just can't predict the future. But based on what I see right now, we live in a world where more and more organizations are relying entirely on, as an example, digital voiceover audio. If you work in the voiceover profession, you have a major problem. If you work in the translation field, you have a significant problem because the technology is getting that good in certain areas where it's starting to take over certain capabilities. And my instructional design team, as an example, we use almost entirely digital voices. And I know that because I used to do a lot of voiceover work for our content team. I have a big microphone, so they would call me to do voiceovers. I don't get those phone calls anymore, which is fine because we found new ways to accomplish that work. So things like captions, basic illustration generation, automating certain types of content, all of that's possible today. Frankly, I don't think an instructional designer should have to write a multiple choice question very much, if at all, soon, because machines can handle that for us now. When we move into next year, so just 12 to 18 months from now, I believe subject matter experts are going to start to take advantage of these tools and become more and more creators themselves and have less reliance on people to do all of that work for them. Still do the specialty work, the more advanced type of stuff, but I believe more people in our organizations are going to take advantage of these tools to become creators. I believe digital assistants are going to become mainstream moving into next year. So it just becomes a part of the technology you use, just like you now use Teams or Slack as part of your story alongside email. Search is going to return answers like it already does in a lot of systems today, instead of just returning a list of hyperlinks. So we're going to quickly see this technology advance. And I think the transition between this year and next year is we're going to start to find problems to solve and where it fits in the workflow and how it's not just a cool thing that we have an add-on for, or, you use your AI tools for certain things and the rest of your tools for other things. That world's going to blend, and it's going to be more about, again, AI is informing the entire technology story. And then within 5 years, I don't know exactly what our world is going to look like, but I believe fundamentally digital content creation is going to look radically different 5 years from now. I think we're going to get closer and closer to a blend between learning and operations. Because for me, learning is fundamentally an operational function in a business. It's about helping people do their jobs more effectively. I think learning and learning technology is going to blend closer and closer with everyday tools people use on their job because, frankly, we've been trying to do that for years. I think this is going to help us get there. Personalization is going to be the norm. Accessibility and availability of information that you can get to in a more equitable fashion is going to become the norm. So our world's going to look meaningfully different in 5 years. Doesn't feel like a long time, but just look how quickly things have changed since ChatGPT came out in late 2022 at this point. And the best example I can use where how I think the world is going to shift and the workplace is going to shift through technology is actually at your local grocery store, specifically in the Northeast, because I think y'all have had this exact experience with some grocery chains in the Philadelphia region. During the pandemic, grocery chains got very into, and retailers in general, got very into self-checkout. And your local store probably ripped out a significant number of lanes and replaced them with machines. At the same time, reduced their labor spend by making that change. But then something happened as people got really interested in how this technology can change how work is done, change the way we spend money, change what we need people to do in the store. They forgot one fundamental problem. People steal. And a lot of retailers started to realize they were losing more money through the self-checkout lane than they were gaining in terms of efficiency and cost savings by removing the cashier and the standard lane in favor of the technology. So some chains have completely ripped out self-checkout. Some have turned it off. Some have limited it to a certain number of items. So what you see happening is the right sizing of the technology, right? Organizations got very excited about it at a particularly opportune time, leaned really far in, and then realized, oh, went too far, and started sliding back. I believe that's what we're going to be doing with AI for a little while, is kind of our eyes are going to be really big. We're going to see huge opportunities, whether it be cost savings, efficiencies, improvement in quality, what have you. We're going to take some missteps, and we're going to slide back into a world where the right technology is being used in the right way to solve the right types of problems. So as I said in the beginning, I think this statement around AI will not take your job, someone using AI will, I think that's the wrong perspective to take into this conversation, because it assumes that we make all of the decisions and that our job as it exists today continues to exist. And regardless of what you do in L&D or otherwise, I don't believe that's the case moving forward, including for myself. Instead, I think it's important for us to think about it from the perspective of the organization, because AI won't take your job. Your organization is going to apply this technology to change how work gets done. And it's up to us to adopt the right mindset, continue to evolve our skills, but most of all, plug into that conversation to understand, where can I provide the best value in this new version of the workplace? And like I said, instead of allowing AI to be something that happens to us, make it a conversation that we participate in, influence and inform, and help build the AI-enabled learning ecosystem. So that's my story. I do have one more offering. I wrote most of what I just said down, which if anyone here is now like, oh, why didn't you say at the beginning? I didn't have to hang out with this guy for the last hour. If you go to my book website, which is jdwroteabook.com, where you can find more information about the full Modern Learning Ecosystem book, but there's a section called The Next Chapter. And if you click the button and you enter the code 1004, it'll open a PDF document. And it's basically the explanation I just tried to provide around how I think AI is going to transform the function of L&D, just a little bit more substantial, a little bit more detail. So feel free to grab that. Let me know if you think it's interesting. You don't need to read the whole book to understand the add-on. I summarize the book a little bit, and I actually used AI to do that work as well. So yeah, feel free to check that out. And then if there's anything else I can do, and you don't want to talk to me, you can talk to my friend LearnGeek AI. So if you have ChatGPT, you can find the LearnGeek AI custom GPT in the marketplace. It has 1 million words of my writing in its knowledge base, and then it can provide, it can answer basic questions and provide advice on learning strategy in a similar way that I would. And also it is required to make Back to the Future references in every response, which is funny in the beginning, and then it starts to become a little monotonous, which again, I think is the best corollary for talking to me in real life. So if you're curious, you can check out my chat bot as well. And then happy to connect, answer any questions we've got while we're still hanging out here, or if there's anything I can do to help you out moving forward, let me know. This slide deck's on the learngeek.ai website, as well as my list of AI tools and some examples of different types of content I've created and conversations I've had. So with that, what can I do for you while we're still here?
Well,
Josh, how was your
JD,
dinner?
first of all, it looks like we got some things in chat coming up, and one of them I was actually thinking myself, so I'm going to highlight that. Ruth wrote in there, in your experience using AI tools, are there steps you've taken to protect your data and proprietary info? Have you come across any security risks we should be aware of? And yeah, I'm going to add on to that, like I said, because I thought it was interesting with protecting your data. I saw you copyrighted one of the image slides, and I don't, or maybe they were, or maybe the copyrights just across the whole thing, because I know that's a weird thing too with AI. So I don't know if you can protect those or not as part of the general context of how you protect your stuff against AI.
Yeah, currently the way copyright law works, you can't really copyright content generated by a machine. So, and I'm not trying to in this, I have the same trademark or
yeah, I realized it's on every slide after I said
that. But yeah, around the risk factor, definitely still obviously a conversation within, it should be a conversation. You should not be plugging any proprietary information into any tool that's not approved by your IT function, especially if it's free. That's where mistakes get made. I think there were some very high profile mistakes in the beginning of this conversation a year and a half ago that put a lot of people on edge. So the recommendation I would have is anytime you work with any tech vendor, because like I said, it's not about AI and other technology. It's just technology now. Ask them for a detailed explanation as to how their system works and where your data touches any type of AI model, machine learning, large language model. How do those two things interact? So as an example, with the digital assistant tool that my team built, we use retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, as the technology, where basically the model that we're using as part of the digital assistant tool, the model never uses a company's information to train its understanding of language or anything like that. The model is simply being used to interpret the information that's provided and then return it in natural language. So it is not being trained in any way or does not have regular access to the knowledge base. It's just being fed basically a search result, and it's basically being asked, what does this mean? What would the response be based on this information? So it's interpreting information as opposed to being trained on and learning any type of information. So ask for a detailed breakdown of how their technology works and where your data touches any type of model in order to make sure that there's no bleed over or kind of a risk taking place. But of course, anytime you're looking at, especially now, but it's been true the entire time, if you're doing any shopping for technology, bring IT with you. You need your friends. Buy them lunch first, and then ask them to help you make sure you're making the right decisions, because we should highly scrutinize any technology we use in our practices or in our organizations. But yeah, I think overall, I do think it's a increasingly solved problem for specific types of applications, just based on how we're architecting this type of tech moving forward.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have questions they want to unmute and ask or put into the chat? And I'll tell you what,
Can you add the
think we
link
got
to
one.
the chat,
Good.
to that book that add that to the chat?
The
book
book
link?
website. Yep, sure. Actually, I just go back in the slides too. Yeah, jdwroteabook.com, which is the silliest book website URL ever. And then you scroll a little bit down the page, you'll see the giant next chapter. And then for trivia buffs out there, the code is 1004 because that is the time the lightning bolt struck the clock tower in Back to the Future, 10:04 p.m. So 1004. And if you can't get it, just email me. I'll send it to you too. But I just wanted to put it in a place where people could get to it.
Yeah, and I actually just downloaded it. It was pretty easy and extensive. It's like 50 pages, so it's
Yes,
a heck of
it's
bonus feature.
12,000 words. So it might be the longest handout in the history of webinars.
It's pretty good.
I'll
see
see
if
one item there. So JD, I put it in there, but during the sitcom King of Queens, Doug pulls up to a mannequin at a fast food place that talks, and he's talking to it, and he ends up getting in a fight with the thing because it wouldn't customize his order. It was hilarious, but yeah, it's frustrating when the AI can't do what you ask it to do when you're calling into a customer center or whatever.
Or when it makes up answers.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. We're kind of living in this world, especially in the beginnings of this conversation, where we're trying to have this kind of multi-purpose reality where you're trying to use a ChatGPT or a Copilot to do or Gemini to do a lot of different things. As an example, all the images in my deck today that were AI generated, it was ChatGPT did all that work, because I don't feel the need to go like heavier with like a Midjourney or any of these kind of specialty tools, because I'm just trying to create images of a guy in a green hoodie looking generally confused about things, and it does a good job of that. But I believe we're quickly moving towards this world of specialty applications, where instead of going to a tool that does 5 different things, this type of technology is going to underpin certain specific features within the types of applications you use every day. So simple example, most LMSs pretty soon will just be able to automatically generate course descriptions. So you upload your material, it automatically populates a lot of those fields for you, and then you go in and tweak those materials. Some of them can already do it, but it's those types of purposeful enhancements that you're going to see in addition to kind of some of the bigger tools like digital assistants and that type of stuff. But things like automated transcription, captioning, translation. Synthesia just announced a cool tool earlier today where they're basically, if anyone here does translated content, let's say you had a video in English and you wanted to translate into 5 additional languages, usually that means 6 assets, right? So you have to upload 6 different things and manage 6 different things in your learning management system or wherever you put content. Synthesia is dropping a multi-language player. So using their tech, the viewer of the video, just like you can turn on and off closed caption, and like in Zoom, you can pick different translations for captioning. You can pick the translation for the video, and the video just changes to whatever the translated variant of it is. And it's not just the language. It could be an entirely different video because you're localizing it to a different audience in that regard. And so on the back end, they're taking care of that problem where, you know, they help you create the 6 different versions, but they snap them together in one player experience versus it being, you know, you as the employee having to decide, do I enroll in the English one or the Spanish one or the French one? A lot of that's getting smoothed out by this type of technology moving forward.
So I do have a question too, and if anybody else does after it, please queue it up either in chat or you can come off mute. You may have just answered this, but one of the things I've struggled with in image generation, and I've mostly used like Copilot or ChatGPT, is anytime there's words.
Oh yeah.
And overall, I don't know how many, maybe it just took you a whole bunch of attempts since you're using the same tool, but because you definitely had some of your graphics that had titling that was part of the image. So was that trial and error, or do you have any special sauce there?
I don't, but like I said, I don't usually need to generate really specific imagery. That's a known issue, kind of like we've always been making the joke for the last year that hands are difficult for AI to figure out, right? Faces,
you mean they don't have 8 fingers on them?
Yeah, but if you remember, if you go back a year and a half, faces were really hard too. Yeah. And that problem's going away pretty quickly. So it's kind of like we talked about the synthetic human piece. You can clearly tell, like, that's not me speaking Korean. You know, that's whatever avatar you're using in your course. It's clearly not a person. But if you compare where avatar tech was even a year ago to now, it's a night and day quality comparison. Imagine where that's going to be in 3 years from now. So all of this tech is rapidly going to a place where these kind of idiosyncrasies and can't quite do that. That's going to be resolved, like I said, as we start to get more targeted with the technology. And it's a little bit less about kind of cool technology coming to market as fast as it can. And it, you know, it's good at certain things, but not good at other things. That all gets smoothed out as we figure out how to, you know, better apply this tech.
So it'll learn how to read.
Yeah, there will be
or actually, sorry, it knows how to read, learn how to write into images, I guess.
Yeah, they'll much smarter people than me will solve for that problem once they have a meaningful motivation to go after that particular issue. Right now, I think today ChatGPT or OpenAI announced a new model that's going to have significantly better reasoning capability. So the ability to actually explain why the answer is the answer, in addition to handling more complex computations and things like that. Because up until this point, most chatbots haven't been really good at math or counting or, you know, those types of things. That problem is quickly being solved too. So that's why I think it's important for any professional, but especially in L&D, where our job is to help other people do their jobs. It's great to watch and pay attention to the tech as it rapidly changes. But I think it's important to, as we're doing that, get ahead of that conversation strategically. So as the tech catches up with the promise, we're having more strategic conversations about where do we fit in this world and how do we enable this new version of a workplace. So
phenomenal. Last call. Anybody got anything else they want to ask JD before we wrap this up? All right. We gave you his contact info, so you can always reach out. He puts a lot of good stuff on LinkedIn and some interesting job things occasionally as well. So for those of you looking, some good stuff there too. Thanks again, JD. Really appreciate it. I know I picked up some stuff, and now I have a additional chapter of your book to take a look at. So looking forward to that.
I like to give you homework however I can. Side note, the image on screen, AI loves to put me in a turtleneck. anytime
was going
have
to
it.
ask you about that. It looks like you're like it was from an 80s sitcom or something.
Very
but-
smooth, and I'm always in a turtleneck. But yeah, again, thanks everybody so much for hanging out this evening with me. Let me know if I can help in any way. If you have any questions, always happy to do what I can.